Alright, welcome back. This is installment 2 of how to model a house in AutoCAD 3D for use in renderings later. This is the same file that we left off with, although the video cut me off after 15 minutes, and I believe the only thing I did after that was to add the rear elevation in to set up the 3D file. Otherwise, our 3D file is set up, ready to go. We have a referenced in first floor plan. I always use the first floor. It just, down the line, if you do things consistently, it goes quicker. Lined up with that floor plan, based on the first floor height, I have 4 plans. Elevations. I have the front elevation moved behind the building. I have the left side elevation moved to the right side. As I spin it around with my orbit command, which is shift middle mouse button, I look at the right side of the building over on the left side of the building. And again, as I orbit around, there's the rear of the building pushed to the front of the building. This is actual front with the porch and the steps. So I'm going to spin her around or use my isometric shortcuts there to get to my southwest isometric. This is just where I work unless I need to change. Okay, the next step here is to create the walls of the house. This creates the walls and the roof. This gives us a building envelope to work with. We want to use the simple walls. In case of most residential architectural, you're going to have wood framed walls. The architect has these walls drawn as 6 inches thick, which is probably a 2x6, but the drywall is not reflected in the lines. I use whatever the architect did. Usually they're 4 inches, 4.5, 6, 6.5, something like that. So the first thing I want to do is determine how am I going to create the envelope of the building in 3D. I think what I can do, based on looking at it a little bit and playing with this, is that the front of the building can be modeled with 1 or 2 polylines. And bear with me because there's a lot here, but basically you're creating polylines, you're extruding polylines, you're then creating a 3D solid, and then you are chopping that solid up and doing different things with it to get the shapes you want. So I try to be orderly and do all my walls first, all my roofs next, all my windows after that, and then I add on trim and things. There's also, some layering to be concerned about for when you're moving this into a 3D program to do the actual render, but I'll get to that later. So right now I'm going to start with the walls and then maybe the roof in this 15 minutes here. First thing I want to do, again, I'm always looking at my UCS icon down here. Right now, if you type UCS and hit enter twice, it'll put you on, or 3 times, I'm not sure, it puts you on the world UCS axis, which you always want to be flat. Your plan, your first floor is on the ground plane. My 0, 0 is there. Okay. Everything is lined up, good to go. What I'm going to do is start drawing polylines on the elevations to make my walls with. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the front view, because I'm going to start with the front of the house. And again, if we look at the plan here, we can see the front of this house kind of jogs. I look at the elevations, the front looks flat. There's no different jogs in the second, third floors. So this is one wall, and this is the other wall. Between those 2 walls and maybe the back of the house, I can get all the geometry I need to model this thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the front of the house with my view cube shortcut bar, which is the view shortcut bar. That changes my UCS upright. Then I'm going to look at my isometric view. Again, I just glance at that to make sure I'm working in this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with a polyline command to trace the walls. Again, I'm not going to worry about this bump out for right this second, but I'm going to start here. I always start with the side. It's hard to tell in this drawing, but there is a kind of a gable here. It's only pitched, 1/8 inch and whatever. My polyline is following the walls. I don't want to draw to the trim projections. And then I'm going to hit C to close my polyline. So there's one of them. I'm going to go ahead and draw the second front wall. I'm going to the intersection of this wall and the roof. I had to type it in. I want it to join up with my other wall, so I'm going to just click that point, and I'm going to hit C for close. Now I've got two closed polylines on the front of this house. I'm going to go ahead and start modeling with that. So I see that this wall sticks out further, so I'm going to start with this one. There's 100 ways to do this, but I do it the same way usually. So now if I have this view, this toolbar up as well, which changes my view from wireframe. I generally use realistic, so when I zoom around I can kind of see a finished product, but I generally work in wireframe. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create the front wall of that house by doing the 3D command slice. I have it shortcutted to SL. I want to select the object I'd like to slice, enter with my mouse, select start of slicing plane. So I want to tell it that I'm slicing on the XY plane because my XY is tilted up. I'm going to select the inside of the wall, and I'm going to say B for keep both sides because I don't want to get rid of that other geometry yet. So what that did was slice this front of this wall, slice this solid that this, we drew a polyline command, and then we extruded that polyline command, and now we sliced it. This front wall, if I orbit with my mouse while that's selected, it sort of isolates it so I can see what I just created. That looks to be like that front wall. So what I'm going to do with the remaining portion is slice that up till I get the little sidewall here, the sidewall going back. So what I do is I slice that remaining solid. Now this time I'm going to slice, so I'm looking at my UCS, I want to slice kind of left to right here. So I'm going to slice on my YZ plane. And again, select the inside of the wall and tell it to keep both sides. Now as I look back, you can see I sliced kind of that wall off. I'm going to go ahead and create the shell by slicing this wall off. So slice this object, and again, it's finicky as to how you select. If I go to say slice and just select, whatever. You try to grab a line to slice from, as a line that's part of the solid. So I'm going to slice that on my YZ plane, pick the inside of the wall. This time I don't want to keep the remainder because that's the inside. I want to create a hollow shell for this rendering. So I'm going to pick the inside of the, I'm going to pick the outside of the wall. And that just told me to keep this side. So if I look at my realistic view, I've got a hollow shell. And I'd like to keep these walls as sort of separate objects. Then what I'm going to do is trim these two side walls back to where they go. Well, since my front plane is out here, I want to slice this left side on my XY axis to the inside of this wall, because I'm going to create this wall in a second. And then I'm going to say keep just this side. So as I zoom back, I've got that little return wall. As I look at the right side of this house, I see that the wall is the same going back until this point, in which, if you look at the back elevation, you've got this kind of bump up. So what I'm going to do is slice this wall on my XY plane at the back of this bump out. Now I don't want to hit the trim, I want to hit the wall. And it's asking which side to keep. I'm going to pick something here. And as I look back, my geometry is right. So let's go ahead and create the other side of the house. I'm going to extrude this polyline out to where the wall is. And I'm going to slice it on my XY plane at the inside of the wall and say keep both sides. So I've got this remainder. I'm going to slice it on my YZ plane and keep the outside. Then I'm going to slice this object on my XY plane, and I could either pick this point on the elevation, or I can just go ahead and use this wall, and I know they're going to line up because it's obviously a flat bump out across the middle of the house. So I'm going to keep the front. That gave me kind of the front of the house. So what I'm going to do now is go up here and look at my rear elevation, and I'm going to skip over to the third isometric view. Now I want to draw a polyline on the back of this house. Again, I'm going to use this line I extended last time I'm going to go all the way up to here, all the way up to the gable. And again, this is my bump out. I don't want to worry about that yet. I'm going to stick to the main body of the house. And I'm going to close that polyline. Again, I extrude it to the back of the house, slice it on my XY plane, which is tilted up to the back. I'm going to tell it to keep both sides. Now I've got this chunk in the middle. I'm going to slice it on my YZ, keep both sides. And I'm going to slice the remainder on the YZ of this wall and keep just this side. Now, as you can see, these are still extended back, so I would like to slice them. And again, sometimes you work in this view. It's just hard to pick because there might be a line in 2D behind here, and I go to pick. It's hard to work here, so I generally work in wireframe. This is a little more gratifying to see your changes right away, so sometimes, you switch back and forth. So what I'm going to do is slice both of these walls at the same time on my XY plane where they change. And now I'm going to pick a point on this end of what I want to keep. Now right away I can see I've got the basic shell of the house. Feel free, if this ever is something where people type comments, I'll try to answer things. I could certainly spend an hour talking about one little piece of the process here, but I don't think anybody wants that. So if we go back to my wireframe view and kind of, I'm often orbiting around a little just to understand, this becomes Escher-like if you're not careful. So I'll step back and kind of orbit to make sure I've got things right. This side wall probably wants to be one object. So I'm going to use the union command, which I can type UN, or there's this solids editing command. I'm going to say union, and I'm going to select these two objects. Same with the other side. So that just turned it into one object. You don't want a wall chopped up into a million bits. In your renders later, you'll get glitches and artifacts or whatever. While I'm up on this plane, I see that there's this section of wall that needs to go in. I'm going to draw it straight just as a rectangle. So I'm going to use the rectangle command, and I'm going to go to the inside here. Now I'm going to extrude that a distance of -6. Now if I view this in realistic again, you can see this is basically all of the walls except this bump out. Let's go ahead and draw that while I'm up on this UCS plane. I'm going to go back to wireframe. Well, I'm going to show you why, because if I draw in realistic mode, again, I'm going all the way to the wall, so I'm using my perpendiculars a lot to get past this trim and stone and just building a very simple shell of the house. I'm going to use this point, and I'm going to say C for close. If I extrude, I'm going to go back to wireframe. If I extrude this object, I'm going to use the elevation as my reference. So I'm going to extrude it to this point. See, it's over there. Now I'm going to slice it to the other side on my XY plane, and I'm going to keep this side. So now I've got a box sitting on the house. Well, I probably want to hollow that out because if I have a window in it, the light's not gonna act right if it's solid. So in this case, what I'm going to do is flatten up my UCS plane back to the ground level, and by typing UCS, enter a couple times, and you can see my XY is back to the ground level. Then I'm just going to draw a rectangle at the bottom of this solid. I'm going to offset that a distance of 6 inches. And then I want to actually pull this inner rectangle with my ortho on back into the house. That will allow me something to subtract out of this box. I also want to subtract that out of this wall so this wall doesn't play through. So what I'm going to do is extrude that. I'm going to go quick here because my 15 is ending. I'm going to extrude it up. I'm going to copy it over itself. Then I'm going to use the subtract command, which is again up here, subtract. I'm going to say I want to subtract from this object and pick that box, which there are two. Now you can see it made me a hollow object. Now I want to subtract that same object from that outside wall. Bam, looks cool. I'll see you in the next video.